Remember when Leonardo DiCaprio stepped off that fog-shrouded ferry into one of cinema's most unsettling asylums? The twist no one saw coming. The lighthouse that never existed. The film that almost wasn't made. Today, we're counting down 15 weird facts you never knew about Shutter Island. Number 15. Look at the words Shutter Island on the movie poster. You've probably seen it 100 times. What audiences never noticed is this. Take those letters and rearrange them. You get truths and lies. A mathematically perfect anagram that captures the entire film's architecture of deception. Fans have also discovered it rearranges into truth/denials, which is equally fitting. Whether author Dennis Lehane embedded this intentionally has never been confirmed, but the precision feels too perfect to be coincidence. Think about that. The title itself is hiding the twist in plain sight. Here's the thing though, the working title during production was actually Ashcliff, the name of the asylum. Producers Brad Fisher and Mike Medavoy from Phoenix Pictures nearly abandoned the title that contained this hidden message. Imagine if they had. The film would have lost one of its most elegant secrets before anyone even bought a ticket. Every time you see that title card now, you're staring directly at the film's central theme spelled out in scrambled letters. It's the kind of detail that makes you wonder what else Scorsese hid in plain sight. The anagram works in multiple languages too, which suggests either intentional design or remarkable coincidence. Either way, it's brilliant storytelling embedded in two simple words. And speaking of hidden messages, the location where they filmed was hiding something even more extraordinary. Number 14. Those imposing Victorian buildings that make up Ashcliff weren't built on a studio backlot. They're real. Medfield State Hospital in Massachusetts, originally called Medfield Insane Asylum when it opened in 1892, served as the exterior location. At its peak, this facility housed 2,200 patients across 58 buildings spanning 1.4 square miles. It generated its own electricity, heat, and food. The place was a self-contained city of the mentally ill. It closed in 2003, just 5 years before Scorsese showed up with cameras. Historian John Thompson reported that producers told him they could have filmed anywhere in the world, but they chose Medfield because it is, in his words, the last almost fully intact asylum in the whole world. DiCaprio described the atmosphere on set, saying, "You felt this weird sense of confinement there. That unease you feel watching those scenes? It's real. The cemetery plaque you see in the film, the one that reads, 'Remember us, for we too have lived, loved, and laughed,' that's real too. It marks the graves of patients whose unclaimed bodies were donated to Harvard University for medical research." Production designer Dante Ferretti kept it in the frame deliberately. Every asylum shot you're watching carries the weight of actual history, actual suffering. The authenticity you feel isn't manufactured. But the real location wasn't the only thing Scorsese wanted to keep authentic. Number 13. Dr. Cawley's calm British authority. That ever-present pipe he smokes. None of it was in the original script. In Dennis Lehane's novel, Dr. Cawley is American and smokes cigarettes. Ben Kingsley pitched Martin Scorsese on a radical reimagining, make the character British. He told The Independent, "Marty saw him as American. I said, may I make him someone on a quest? A knight goes where the dragons are." Scorsese agreed on the spot. Then Kingsley claimed the pipe, replacing Cawley's cigarettes with a prop inspired by the 1946 Powell and Pressburger film A Matter of Life and Death, which both he and Scorsese revered. These two changes fundamentally altered how audiences perceive the character. Cawley's Britishness makes him feel like an outsider, someone observing American madness from a clinical distance. The pipe adds an old-world intellectualism, a theatricality that makes you question whether he's performing compassion or genuinely feeling it. No other actor in the film reshaped their character this substantially from the source material. Kingsley took an American psychiatrist who smokes cigarettes and turned him into something far more ambiguous and unsettling. When you rewatch now, notice how much authority that accent and that pipe give him. It makes every reassurance he offers feel like it could be manipulation. And Scorsese's obsession with atmosphere extended all the way to the film's very first sound. Number 12. The eerie foghorns that open the film. The ones you hear as DiCaprio's character approaches the island. You assumed they were just ambient sound from the ferry, environmental audio recorded on location. They're not. They're actually a piece called Fog Tropes by composer Ingram Marshall, a composition for brass instruments and tape delay. Scorsese told Indie London, "It's not a sound effect, it's an actual piece of music." The film's unsettling tone begins with this deliberate deception. The audience hears what they think is diegetic environmental sound, but its avant-garde composition chosen specifically to create unease. Meanwhile, VFX supervisor Rob Legato created the fog visuals using 3 boats equipped with Navy jet foggers, blasting smoke across the water to build that oppressive atmosphere. Scorsese gave Legato one instruction for the opening sequence: don't make it look like Skull Island. He wanted foreboding, not fantasy. Think about what this means for the film's structure. From the very first sound, Scorsese is lying to you in the most elegant way possible. You're hearing music disguised as reality, which is exactly what the entire film does visually. The movie announces its unreliable reality in the first 10 seconds. And most people never consciously register it. Marshall's composition had been used in experimental theater before, but never in a mainstream thriller. That obsession with subliminal manipulation, with making the audience feel something they can't quite identify, runs through every frame Scorsese shot. Number 11. Those dreamlike flashback sequences. The ones where DiCaprio remembers his wife and children. Something always felt slightly wrong about them, didn't it? A vague sense of unreality you couldn't quite pin down. Now you know why. Scorsese embedded reverse motion effects throughout these scenes that operate below conscious perception. Editor Thelma Schoonmaker worked with Scorsese to create what she called improvisational cutting, which included these reversed elements. The technique creates a feeling of wrongness that mirrors Andrew Laetis's own fractured perception of reality. He feels something is off, but cannot articulate why. The audience experiences that same cognitive dissonance without understanding its source. This is a directorial choice designed to make viewers feel insane alongside the protagonist. You're not watching a reliable narrator's memories. You're watching a broken mind trying to reconstruct events, and the footage itself is corrupted. Once you know this trick exists, you'll catch the reversed moments everywhere on rewatch. Little violations of physics that your brain registered but couldn't process. It's filmmaking as psychological warfare. But the most brilliant clues Scorsese planted were hiding in plain sight the whole time, waiting for obsessive rewatchers to discover them. Number 10. Here are 3 details Scorsese and editor Thelma Schoonmaker embedded throughout the film that only the most obsessive fans have caught. First, DiCaprio never lights his own cigarette in the entire movie. Someone always does it for him. Think about why. Mental patients at Ashcliff wouldn't have access to matches or lighters. The staff controls fire. Second, during patient interview scenes, armed guards always stand behind both Teddy and the patients being questioned. But there's never a guard positioned behind Chuck. Never. Because Chuck is actually Dr. Sheehan, and staff members don't need watching. Third, and this is the most deliberate, when patient Bridget Kearns, played by Robin Bartlett, drinks from a glass of water, the glass literally vanishes from the frame between shots. This isn't a continuity error. Scorsese and Schoonmaker deliberately removed it in editing. Water objects disappear from Teddy's traumatized perspective because his children drowned. Water is unreliable in his constructed reality. The attention to detail here is extraordinary. These aren't happy accidents. They're carefully crafted psychological tells that reward frame-by-frame analysis. The film operates on multiple levels simultaneously. You can watch it as a straightforward thriller and it works. Or you can go deeper, catch these clues, and realize Scorsese was showing you the truth from the beginning. The movie rewards obsessive rewatching like almost no other thriller in modern cinema, and these clues weren't accidents. Scorsese came to this project for a very specific reason. Number 9. Which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man? The line that launched 1,000 Reddit debates, the moment that turns the entire film into an ambiguous puzzle. It was invented by screenwriter Leda Kalogridis specifically for the film. It does not appear anywhere in Dennis Lehane's novel. In the book, the ending is definitive. Andrew simply relapses into his Teddy persona with no suggestion of conscious awareness. The film's added line transforms the story from clinical tragedy into existential choice. Here's where it gets interesting. 3 key figures involved disagree about what it means. Scorsese's psychiatric consultant, Professor James Gilligan of NYU, believes Andrew is consciously choosing lobotomy as surrogate suicide. "I feel too guilty to go on living." Lehane disagrees, telling interviewers, "Personally, I think he has a momentary flash. It's just one moment of sanity mixed in the midst of all the other delusions." And Scorsese and DiCaprio have never given an interview breaking down the ending, preserving its ambiguity intentionally. One line, written by a screenwriter adapting a novel, became the most debated moment in the entire film precisely because it departs from the source material. When you rewatch now, you're watching DiCaprio deliver a line that determines whether his character dies aware or dies delusional, and nobody involved will tell you which one is true. Number 8. How did this project even reach Martin Scorsese? He wasn't the first choice. He wasn't even the second. But when the script finally landed on his desk, he was already in the perfect headspace for it. Scorsese was producing and narrating the 2007 documentary Val Lewton, The Man in the Shadows, about the legendary RKO horror producer who pioneered psychological terror in the 1940s. His mind was already deep in the mechanics of atmospheric dread. Then came the coincidence that sealed the partnership. When the agent called producer Brad Fisher to say Scorsese wanted to direct because the script reminded him of this old German movie called Fisher was staring directly at a framed poster of the cabinet of Dr. Caligari hanging on his office wall. Scorsese read the script at 10:30 night and later told Fisher he could not put it down. This wasn't a director looking for his next paycheck. This was an artist recognizing that a script had captured something he'd been obsessing over for years. The entire film is essentially Scorsese's American remake of Caligari, filtered through modern psychological thriller conventions. When you watch it now, you can see Robert Wiena's influence in every distorted angle, every unreliable perspective shift. But even with Scorsese's vision fully formed, the production faced immediate technical disaster. All right, we're at the halfway mark and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 7, what's your favorite Shutter Island quote or moment? Drop it in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, smash that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Number 7. Scorsese originally planned to shoot the Dachau concentration camp flashback sequences using 65mm large format cameras, the kind of equipment reserved for epics and prestige pictures. This would have made Shutter Island one of the first major films of the 2010s shot in that format, years before Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk, Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight, or Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master. Cinematographer Robert Richardson had the Arriflex 765 cameras ready to go. On the second night of shooting with this massive, expensive equipment, it failed. The cameras just stopped working. Only a couple of 65mm shots survived, the ones depicting Teddy walking through the camp in civilian clothing. Everything else had to be completely reshot on standard 35mm. Not exactly ideal when you're trying to capture the visual scope of one of history's greatest atrocities. Adding to the chaos, the Dachau massacre scene, where American soldiers execute Nazi guards lined up against a fence, was the very first shot filmed for the entire production. They built it inside the Whittington Mills textile factory in Taunton, Massachusetts, 40 miles south of Boston. So the production's opening day involved technical failure, a last-minute format change, and recreating a Nazi concentration camp inside an abandoned New England factory. When you watch those haunting Dachau sequences now, you're seeing the compromise version. They almost had even more visual power. But the film's most iconic image was an even more elaborate illusion than anyone realized. Number 6. That towering stone lighthouse perched on the cliff, the one that becomes the film's most memorable location and the site of its final revelations. It's one of cinema's greatest composite magic tricks, assembled from 6 separate sources across 3 different states. Here's how they built it. Only a 20-foot-tall stone base was physically constructed at East Point in Nahant, Massachusetts. Everything above that is completely CGI. New Deal Studios built a 1/12 scale miniature, transported on a 40-foot flatbed truck to a beach north of Malibu, California. An 80-ton construction crane lowered it to shore, while a crew of 30 fought the incoming tide. VFX supervisor Matthew Gratzner used a classic hanging miniature technique, lining up the model with real ocean and rocks. His solution for realistic seagulls? He told FX Guide, "I had a PA 100 yards away throwing a handful of bread to get the seagulls at the right scale and perspective. It's basically a big trick." The cliff DiCaprio climbs was filmed at Otter Cliff in Acadia National Park, Maine, requiring a 70-foot crane and a 40-person crew. The ocean wasn't dramatic enough, so waves from Big Sur, California were composited in. 6 locations, 3 states, 1 lighthouse. Production designer Dante Ferretti orchestrated the entire illusion. The lighthouse is pure cinema. and it doesn't exist anywhere in the real world. And the score that accompanies these scenes was equally deceptive. Number 5. The entire Shutter Island soundtrack consists of pre-existing avant-garde classical and contemporary compositions. Not one note was written specifically for this film. This decision automatically disqualified it from competing for Best Original Score at the Oscars, but Scorsese didn't care. The roster of composers reads like a who's who of 20th century experimental music. Gheorghe Ligeti, Krzysztof Penderecki, John Cage, Morton Feldman, Giacinto Scelsi, Alfred Schnittke, Brian Eno, Max Richter, Gustav Mahler, and Ingram Marshall. Music critic Alex Ross of The New Yorker observed that these were composers who would cause the average orchestra subscriber to flee in terror. Music supervisor Robbie Robertson, who had worked with Scorsese for decades, revealed that this was the first time in their entire collaboration that Scorsese told him he had no ideas where to start musically. Robertson's masterstroke was the devastating closing sequence, where he layered Dinah Washington's 1960 recording of This Bitter Earth over Max Richter's 2004 composition On the Nature of Daylight, a blues vocal from 1960 fused with 21st century minimalist classical, separated by 44 years, creating one of the most celebrated and emotionally destructive soundtrack moments in modern cinema. Every piece of music in this film has a history. None of it was composed for what you're watching. The entire score is a curated museum of human unease, pulled from 6 decades of experimental composition. But the film's real tragedy happened off-screen, in a studio boardroom. Number 4. August 21st, 2009. Paramount chairman Brad Grey made a decision that shocked Hollywood. He postponed Shutter Island from its planned October 2, 2009 award season release to February 19, 2010. This happened just 6 weeks before the film was supposed to premiere. Outdoor advertising campaigns had already been paid for. Magazines had already featured fall movie previews, with Shutter Island prominently listed. Deadline called it a shocker in their headline. The official reasons were budget-related. Paramount couldn't afford the $50 to $60 million marketing campaign needed for a proper awards push. DiCaprio was unavailable for international promotion during the fall. The studio may have also wanted to clear the runway for their other awards contender, Up in the Air. Test screening scores had been strong, reportedly in the high 80s to low 90s range, so quality wasn't the issue. But the delay meant the film fell into the worst possible release window. The result was brutal. 0 Academy Award nominations. This made Shutter Island the only Scorsese-DiCaprio collaboration to be completely shut out from Oscar recognition. Their other 4 films together, Gangs of New York, The Aviator, The Departed, and The Wolf of Wall Street, collected over 30 nominations combined, including Best Picture nods for all 4. A $295 million worldwide box office hit that received 0 Oscar recognition because of a release date decision made in a corporate meeting. But one actor almost never made it into the film at all. Number 3. Before Mark Ruffalo was cast as Chuck Oll, both Robert Downey Jr. and Josh Brolin were seriously considered for the role. Ruffalo secured it by doing something the others didn't. He wrote Martin Scorsese a personal fan letter expressing how deeply he admired the director's work and how much he wanted to collaborate with him. He later told E! Online, "I've been a big fan of his, pretty much through 20 years of acting." That letter got him the meeting. His audition got him the role. The irony became clear years later when all 3 actors who had competed for Chuck Oll became major players in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Ruffalo as the Hulk, Downey as Iron Man, Brolin as Thanos. 3 of the biggest characters in modern blockbuster cinema, and they all wanted the same role in a Scorsese thriller. Ben Kingsley, who worked closely with Ruffalo throughout the shoot, later observed in interviews that Ruffalo's quiet intensity perfectly suited the dual nature of the Chuck/Dr. Sheehan character. You need an actor who can play trustworthy and deceptive simultaneously. Someone whose performance holds up under repeated viewings when you know the truth. When you rewatch the film now, Ruffalo's performance is extraordinary. He's hiding his true identity in every single scene, but he never overplays it. He's just slightly too helpful, too understanding, too invested in Teddy's delusions. The fan letter led to one of the film's most crucial performances. But there's something even Scorsese himself wishes he could hide about this production. Number 2. In a 2023 GQ interview conducted ahead of the release of Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese made a stunning admission. He said that winning the Best Director Oscar for The Departed encouraged me to make another picture with Shutter Island. It turned out I should have gone on probably to do Silence. He called Shutter Island the last studio film I made and described the experience in brutal terms. If that was the only way I was able to be allowed to make films, then I'd have to stop. The results weren't satisfying. It was at times extremely difficult and I wouldn't survive it. I'd be dead. He also referenced painful interactions with Harvey Weinstein during production, saying, "Weinstein came in and did some things that I felt were extremely mean." The experience fundamentally redirected Scorsese's entire career trajectory. Every single film he's made since has been financed independently, outside the traditional studio system. The Wolf of Wall Street through Red Granite Pictures, Silence through independent financing, The Irishman through Netflix, Killers of the Flower Moon through Apple, a $295 million box office hit that permanently changed how one of cinema's greatest living directors does business. The film audiences love, the one that's become a cult classic, caused its director so much pain that he walked away from studio filmmaking forever. But the film's most debated moment came from an unexpected creative source. Number 1. Shutter Island passed through 3 entirely different creative visions before it reached Martin Scorsese. First, Wolfgang Petersen, the director of Das Boot and The Perfect Storm, was attached to the project through Columbia Pictures back in 2003. He was planning to transform Dennis Lehane's psychological novel into an action-packed blockbuster. That version collapsed, and Columbia Pictures let the rights lapse entirely. Second, David Fincher circled the project with serious intent. He was planning to direct it with Brad Pitt and Mark Wahlberg as the 2 leads, leveraging his existing relationships with Pitt from Fight Club, Seven, and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. That version also fell apart when scheduling and budget issues became insurmountable. Dennis Lehane reclaimed his rights and sold them to Phoenix Pictures, where producers Mike Medavoy and Brad Fisher hired screenwriter Laeta Kalogridis. Then came the final twist. Scorsese and DiCaprio were originally planning to make The Wolf of Wall Street as their 4th collaboration immediately after The Departed. They couldn't secure the $100 million budget. Only then did they pivot to Shutter Island as a backup project. The film went on to gross nearly $300 million worldwide and became Scorsese's biggest commercial hit at the time. The Wolf of Wall Street wouldn't actually get made until 2013. 3 full years later. Every version of Shutter Island that almost happened would have completely erased the Scorsese-DiCaprio masterwork that exists today. The film you love was the backup plan that became a masterpiece. Shutter Island remains culturally unforgettable because its production mirrors the story it tells. Hidden truth beneath surface appearances. A lighthouse built from 6 locations that doesn't exist in reality. A musical score from pre-existing compositions. Clues in cigarette lighting, guard placement, and reversed footage. The production faced broken cameras, studio interference, and a director who regrets making it. The most surprising truth? The film almost never existed. What we got was 2 projects falling apart at the right moment. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this movie. And as always, which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man? We'll see you next time.